with the war continuing to rage in Ukraine, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Rebekah Koffler. She's a Russian-born U.S. intelligence expert. She's worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency, with the CIA. She's briefed the Pentagon, and she is the author of an important book called Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. Rebekah, thanks for joining me. Delighted to have you. I want to talk about Russia and Ukraine, but before I do that, I'd like people to get to know you a little better. You grew up in Russia. Talk a little bit about your kind of formative years and then when you or your family moved to America.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Dinesh. I'm so delighted to be here with you and your audience. Yes, I was born and raised behind the Iron Curtain in the former Soviet Union. And my parents never agreed with the Soviet system, and they were raising me to go to America eventually. They encouraged me to learn English, which I did from third grade, and then all through high school. And then I went to the university in Moscow, and I learned some more. And eventually, in 1989, I came to America just like my mother wanted me, the land of freedom and justice and opportunity. And after September 11th, I really wanted to go serve in the intelligence community. And I became an intelligence officer at DIA, and I worked with CIA as well.
Now, Rebekah, as you know, the Berlin Wall came down 1989. The Soviet Union dissolved 1991, 1992. A lot of people breathed a huge sigh of relief. And there were a lot of theories floating around at the time that the ideological conflict that had defined the 20th century was now a thing of the past. And that the new Russian leadership, starting, of course, with Yeltsin, but now continuing with Putin, was somehow uprooted from that old communist ideology, was charting a new path. And I'd like you to comment as someone who was sort of there and then observed it from America. What is going on with Russia today? Has Russia broken completely with its communist past, or is Putin a link to that past?
So while everyone expected the so-called peace dividend, Dinesh, no one in Russia really expected Russia to magically turn into democracy. There's nothing really in Russian history that points to the fact that democracy would be even a viable system of governance. And so I was absolutely not surprised seeing that Putin came to power, a typical authoritarian, a very typical Soviet KGB style operative produced by the same culture that produced Ivan the Terrible, who killed his own son, and Joseph Stalin, who murdered millions of Russian people. So it's an excellent question whether Russia has broken with its communist part. Past. An interesting piece of data is that every single time that Putin was elected president by the Russians, which was 4 times, the runner-up was a communist. So communism is well alive in the Russian thinking. And in fact, the popularity of Joseph Stalin, the bloody, murderer and communist, is now rising in Russia.
There's been some debate about Putin himself and what his objectives are, and this begins to bear upon the Ukraine. Is it the case that Putin in some ways is looking as best as he can to reconstitute something of the old Soviet empire, obviously in a somewhat new form? Or is Ukraine a kind of one-off challenge for him? In other words, he goes, here is this little country right on my border. I want to have a country here that's not going to be openly hostile to me in any way, but I'm not looking for other prey. This bear is only interested in one meal, and that's Ukraine. But I think you see that Putin has a larger objective, and it goes way beyond Ukraine, doesn't it?
Absolutely, 100% correct. Ukraine is not a one-off. Dinesh, Putin has always wanted to reconstitute a USSR-like alliance where countries like Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus, Moldova, possibly the Stans would go back under Moscow's control. Putin never made his strategic ambitions a secret. This ambition of his is clearly recorded in every single strategic planning document that he approved. The Russian military doctrine, the national security strategy, foreign policy concept, the list goes on. It's just that we haven't really been listening and believing him. And people who were listening, who were trying to warn us, like Senator Romney, like myself, I tried to warn the intelligence community. We were laughed at and called crazy. Well, now here we are grasping at straws because we never developed a counterplan to Putin's playbook.
And do you think, Rebekah, that what Putin is after here is a kind of a Russo-Chinese, Iranian or Turkish alliance that would provide a unified or semi-unified counterweight to the West? In other words, is Putin's plan part of a larger plan that might include Xi, might include people like the mullahs in Iran?
Right. So, yes, he is a long-term thinker, a pretty clever strategic planner. And his ambition is really to develop a counterweight in terms of a military, loosely affiliated military alliance to counter NATO, which was stood up as a direct counterweight to the Soviet Union, right? But he also would like to present a counterweight in the moral sort of sense. He is seeing, and the Russian general staff, the Russian government, seeing what is happening today in our country with democracy, where the foundational principles of democracy have been stood up on their head, so to speak, right? We are really now oppressing free speech ourselves. The big tech is the big brother today, censoring religious voices, conservative voices. We are now redefining the marriage, right, as a union between man and a woman. And so Putin is amplifying this sort of his propaganda, saying the West is degrading. We can't really allow this type of democracy. And we, Russia, China, we are pro-traditional family values. We represent, Russian Orthodox Church spiritual values, and the list goes on and on and on. And so that's where that unity comes in that you articulated. But when it comes to Russia and China, they're more of a marriage of convenience to the extent that they both hate the United States and view us as a threat. And that's why they're aligning forces. But they're not really allies in the American sense of the word, like we in Great Britain are.
Let's take a pause, Rebekah. When we come back, let's probe further some of the themes in your book, Putin's Playbook. We'll be right back.